Well, it was actually 28 years ago since Stanley and I first came over the threshold at Holy Rood House in Thirsk, because the healing ministry in the area of Yorkshire, which was then in the Diocese of Ripon, it's now called Diocese of Leeds and covers a lot more areas of Yorkshire. They set up a healing ministry back in the 70s through Bishop Maurice Maddox, who's well known for his very classic work, really, on the healing ministry. And he was the Archbishop of York and Archbishop of Canterbury's advisor for healing. And he wanted to set up a prayer group in Yorkshire, which he did. And Juliet Ramsden, who was a trustee with the charity right from those times and right through until very recently, she passed away fairly recently. She was part of that, and she linked Stanley and I into that part of the healing ministry when we used to stay over near to where Juliet lived. At that time, we were clergy in a tough area in Leeds. It was all during the 1980s, very difficult time. We worked very much on the edge with people. We were developing inclusivity in our language, in the way we worked with people. It was a very inclusive church. We worked through the terrible time of the AIDS crises then, and I worked very much with young people. I was actually a youth and community worker before I was made a deaconess in 1984. I was deaconess then and then deacon in 1987. So I was never a priest in Leeds, but I'm working as a chaplain, or the chaplain of Abbey Grange High School, which is a big school. I was there for 8 years. First woman chaplain, I think, I'm pretty certain, of a school in England.
You're the first woman in many aspects as well, aren't you? One of the first to
Well, yes, I was a bit of a pioneer. Still am, I hope. Hope I'll always be a pioneer. Yes, so we were working there. I was doing a lot of work with women and girls who were going through terrible, terrible times. So we were involved in the healing ministry in every way, really, working along with our Muslim and Hindu brothers and sisters, seeking justice, seeing healing as very much a justice issue. And we had healing services then, and we felt everything was about Jesus as healer and teacher, who always went together, and how we understood the Gospels and so on. And meanwhile, while all that was going on, Juliet Ramsden and Maurice Maddox and others were developing the work, which became the North of England Christian Healing Trust. That was the first title of the charity, and they set up a house called Spennythorne Home of Healing, which was in Wensleydale. So I used to take people there who were in need of respite. So I used to drive them there, leave them there, go and pick them up. And I also took the youngsters I was working with there, which was great fun. They thought it was very exciting, this very posh house. They'd never seen anything like it. And they used to say, oh, all these servants they've got, which was really the women who came in with a trolley of cake, you know. But so we were linked in a way at that level. And Stanley and I used to think it'd be really interesting to work, develop the healing ministry. Not there, not the right kind of place or culture, really, but starting afresh. But nevertheless, we're very dedicated to the inner city. And we'd made a commitment to be there. We were there for 12 years and we were going to carry on working there. But at the same time, there was another community, the Sisters of the Holy Rood, an Anglican order of sisters who originally were in Middlesbrough. And they, way back, this is during, when there were a lot of industrial accidents and so on, and they set up these women, this order to support the poor. And they set up the first cottage hospital in Britain, which was wonderful. Anyway, in the 70s, they came to Thirsk, and they were no longer, they were a healing order, but no longer doing what they had done, but they're working in the community. Their order was coming to an end. at the end of 1992. And as they were coming to an end, our community in Leeds and the community at Spennythorn Home of Healing, we kind of all dovetailed 3 communities. And we were asked completely out of the blue if we would start again for the healing ministry at Thirsk in what had been the convent. So that was 1993. Yes. Completely out of the blue. We came over incognito. The whole place was closed up. We just had a look, and we knew we had to come. And it was really a start. It was just Annie and I coming along to start it completely afresh. Very hard thing to do, Gillian. It was really hard because our hearts were in the inner city. And we were committed to, I used to do a lot of door-to-door work. I loved it. It was hard. And I loved the chaplaincy in the school as well, and the young people, taking them on retreat and all those things. But we knew it was right. So we came. And strangely, in many ways, it's the same as it was when we started, because what we decided was, first of all, we had to be a community. People had to live on site. We had to create a healing community of hospitality. That is still the case now. We always have people living here. It creates a hub. It's our home. It's where I live. And people have always come to our home, the community's home. So there's a sense of when people have lost home, as it were, within their hearts and lives, and sometimes literally, they can find something home there about, and that's a theology. I remember our very first leaflet that we got printed before we even moved in. We had very clearly justice and peace and the integrity of creation. World Council of Churches. That was the sort of little phrase. So we were always dedicated to healing, being about the environment, the earth, people, yes, of course, but healing was much bigger, and it was always to do with justice. You couldn't really have healing outside of issues around justice. So people were unwell, or we were unwell, because maybe of political issues, social issues, relational issues, things that were unjust, that make us unwell, and so on, that kind of idea. So a lot of what we felt then is still there now. And we also, within a few weeks, we became organisational members of the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy straight away. So we set up a team, all volunteers, and one member of that team is still with us now, hugely experienced, and she's our clinical manager. And she appeared at the door the very first week we moved in and said, "How can I help?" And she's been with us ever since, hugely qualified and experienced woman, and a classical musician, actually. And she lives just down the road, and she's a member of the Methodist Church. Of course, I was a campaigner, as Stanley was, for the ordination of women. And so when I arrived, of course, I was a deacon, one of the permanent deacons then, and then became a priest in 1994, which was a very important model, I think, a woman priest and a male priest together, offering something in the area of healing. And that changed everything, of course, because there were a lot of people who needed a woman priest, particularly in the area of healing. So people had that opportunity to be ministered in different ways. And we felt that was very important. And it was linked for us with the story of the Holy Rood, ROOD, which is Anglo-Saxon for cross. You have the roods, the rood screens in parish churches, of course, and you have John and Mary at the foot of the cross. So you have a man and a woman at the foot of the cross. And we felt there's something about modelling this equality and diversity. And of course, it's much more diverse now with our understanding of sexuality and so on. But that kind of idea was very important right from the very beginning. The ecumenical side was absolutely essential. So we asked, we had a Catholic theologian, Mary Gray, to be a patron alongside Rowan Williams, who was originally a consultant here, then became when he was Archbishop, became our patron. So we got the diversity, and in our trustee membership of people from other denominations, which is very important.
And at Holy Rood today, I mean, I've been there, Elizabeth, and I
Yeah.
have experienced the welcome, the cake, the meeting of other people, that sort of centre of gravity kind of feeling you have when you go to Holy Rood House. Of course, with the gardens and the ducks and the other animals, it's sort of a whole person experience just even going there. But I wonder if people that haven't been there, whether you can paint a picture of the kind of stuff that goes on, maybe your yearly program, your day-to-day life, so people can sort of get a grip on what you mean by in practice.
Well, I suppose Holy Rood House understands something about healing as being what we breathe. It's very much about ordinariness. It's no big deal. So, whether people are of faith or no faith, as they cross the threshold, they're embraced and accepted just where they are. And as they are, just as they, our guests, have to accept us as we are. So there's a kind of mutual woundedness, but a mutual hope. So together we have a sort of daily kind of rhythm, which is, I suppose, centered around hospitality, like the sharing of meals and coffees and walking around the garden, prayer if people want to come into the chapel space, which we try to make very creative so that anyone can feel okay there and can have their own integrity there, which is very important. It's very grounded and earthed. We don't do anything odd, or we're not wacky or anything like that. There's a lot of laughter in the house. The thing is, of course, many people come to us where laughter had disappeared a long time ago, and the fact that they actually come across the threshold is quite something. So again, we have to take great care with how love is shown and how we respond. It's very important to be alongside and be where people are, but bring them in, as it were, and gather them into a kind of ordinary space, which may be very different to their own space they've just come from, because that might have been a space that's caused their ill health, or might be domestic violence or addictions or all sorts of things from where they've come from, but they come into our home and somehow something special happens in the ordinariness of every day.
And can you tell us some stories about the journeys people have made to get to your door? Because this feels a bit sort of theoretical as well. This will sound really alien to some people. So could you just sort of fill in the blanks or colour in the picture a bit, like some of the stories that you've heard?
Some of those who live and work there came at a time of their own need, worked through some real healing in their lives, and then wanted to continue to be with us, which is a wonderful thing. There are whole loads of reasons why people come to us. They're relational in some way or another, really. So there may be major trauma, absolute crises to do with accidents on the road, diagnoses, terminal illness, sudden bereavements, carers who are exhausted through caring, who we welcome and we care for them. And I hope they feel cherished while they're with us. Children who come to us perhaps with a parent who are having to make decisions as to which parent are they going to live with because of a divorce, and they come into a healing space where they perhaps work in the art room with our art therapist or someone like that, or a children's therapist. We have lots of different counsellors who work alongside people to help make decisions. A lot of it's about transition. We have a lot of clergy who come our way. I do make it very clear that, we don't go around looking like clergy at Holy Rood House. It's very important. We're just Fred or Susan. We don't say, oh, this is the Reverend so-and-so. Or we have a lot of GPs, we have nurses, we have all sorts of professional people who come to us at a time of brokenness, time when they're off work. Lawyers, who have been off work for a while and they need to come and have some proper help. But we're just who we are. We're not labelled, which is very, very important. I think a lot of people have no idea I'm a priest, for example, for a long time. And they will do if it's important that they know, or in the chapel or something like that, that might become evident.
So all these different types of people are led to your door for one reason. And I love your image there, Elizabeth, as well, is that you meet them where they are. This is not about job titles or qualifications. It's a welcoming community. But they're at your door for some reason. They're welcomed into the community there. Where do you start discerning how you're going to help someone? How does that process work?
That's really important, Gillian. This this discernment is very, very important. I think we get it near right. We do our best to discern as wisely as we can. We're a community, so we will talk together. We have to be very careful of confidentiality. There's only two of us, Carolyn and myself, who ever book anyone in. No one else books anybody in. So we know quite a lot about people. And if we need to talk together to try and get it right, for example, which room do we give them if they're staying residentially? Do they need to be on the ground floor? Is it wise to put them on in a room that's close? If it's, say a woman who's experienced serious abuse from maybe a man, maybe we keep the woman on a different floor to where there are a couple of men staying or something like that. We have to think all these things. It is about discernment. You're absolutely right, right from the beginning. So first of all, somebody might tentatively phone or email. I think you might be able to help me. I've been Googling your website. I seem to resonate with what you put. It feels as if it's the kind of place where I will feel safe. Would it be possible to come? Does it cost very much money? All these things. And so we start an email conversation, and if possible, as soon as possible, a phone conversation to reassure people that, yes, we work safely. We're able to say to them, look, when you come, it's our home. We welcome you. It's okay. It's not a surgery. It's not clinical. We have a lot of people who've spent time on psychiatric wards, and they need just an ordinary place. That may not have worked for them, or it may have done. Sometimes we have people coming directly from hospital. That may be they need a sort of convalescent time. That may be mental health. It may be physical, an operation or something like that. And so they need a kind of bridging place before they go home. So we reassure them. Now, of course, sometimes we'll have somebody who will say or intimate that perhaps they're not well enough to come, because part of the discerning is that, yes, everybody's welcome, but of course there are conditions. It's not completely unconditional. So as long as somebody is safe enough in themselves and not going to make it unsafe for others, they are welcome. We never say, no, you can't come. What we're more likely to say is, Fred, it's wonderful that you've contacted us. It'd be great. We'd love to have you here. My suggestion is you go back to your doctor, check out your medication, maybe get back on it, and then phone me again in about 6 weeks or so. Let me know how you're doing. We're waiting for you to come. We want you to come. There's no negatives. When we do our emails, we don't put but this or no that, or it's always about hope. And it's always believing that the person themselves are going to find their own healing. We provide the resources that may be needed, the space, and also the professionalism, and also just the community sense of belonging. You don't have to be unwell to come. That's the other thing. And what we encourage here is all sorts of people to come along at the same time. And people don't need to worry, oh, I'm not going there because somebody's come from a psychiatric ward. It's nothing like that at all. It doesn't feel like. It's not like that. It's all sorts of people. Sometimes people come and they're doing their MA. They want to write up their thesis or something like that. And we had a Jewish woman, she lives in Leeds, she was a survivor, really, of the Jewish Holocaust. And she wrote her book. She finished her book. She wanted a safe place to come and write very unsafe stuff. So she chose Holy Rood House, and that book's in our library, dedicated to us, which is lovely. So people come for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes people come for retreat. They just want to come on retreat where it's not too pious, where they don't even have to go to the chapel if they don't want to. Nobody has to feel guilty. They can have food on their own or with the community. They can have silence if they want, or they can chatter away in the lounge with others. They can do weaving. They can go into the art room. They can walk down to the river. They can potter into Thirsk. It's a kind of ordinary place, not a sort of highly pious retreat centre. But people do come on retreat, people, all kinds of people, and people who have very little and others who are professional and have a lot. And one of our policies, which we started the moment we moved in, was that we have a policy that anyone must be able to come and access the services we offer, whatever their financial circumstances. Now, of course, that always puts us on the edge financially, always on the edge. But what's new? Our guests are on the edge. So we work on the edge too. If we weren't on the edge, I think we couldn't really work with integrity with our guests. But, it is wonderful that people who are able to give more. Those who aren't able to pay very much, we work out all sorts of ways in which money might be found. We never say, no, you can't come.
So this is a deliberately provocative question. I wonder, can you describe the healing process? What is Christian healing, and how can you tell it's happened at Holy Rood House?
I think, Gillian, this is a tricky one. Sometimes people ask us, for example, for strap lines. Give us a strap line. Just tell us in a phrase what it is. For me and for the community here, I believe, it's what we breathe. We are Christians. We follow the pioneer of our faith, Jesus Christ. We read the story within the stories of the Gospels. And Jesus was both a healer and a teacher. So for us here, Christian healing is about both those things, which is why we set up the Centre for Study for Theology and Health. So teaching and healing are one and the same, really. They go together. You can't split them up. We breathe Christ. We're in Christ. So everyone who comes across a threshold thinking we might be able to heal them or God might be able to heal them, we see people enfolded in love, as Julian of Norwich, that everyone is enfolded in love. Everyone has that healing within them because they're in Christ, and Christ is the healer, and everyone embodies Christ, the healer. For people who are interested in theological terms, I would say we were very incarnational. The word became flesh. Flesh and blood stuff is flesh. It's us. We have it within ourselves. So working with people here, I may well be sitting down with somebody and they may think that they are no one, nothing. Often, if they've been churchgoers, we have a lot of people who aren't, of course, ever so many. But those who are have often been quite wounded with feeling that they're nobody. They're wretched people. They need forgiveness, all this sort of stuff, so that they come feeling nothing. But what I would do is always find the goodness in them, the wisdom. The very fact that they've come to Holy Rood House is hugely wise. The very fact that that person phoned us, found the courage to ring us at a time of utter loss and abandonment and, feeling they were nobody. That is their wisdom. It's all in there. So I say Christian healing is about what is there in us already. And what we try to provide is resources and the space that might be awakened in people, that what's already there is awakened and comes alive. And people find that they are healing. They are doing the healing. They're transforming themselves. People transform their own lives. We provide, it's about the space, with the churches, what are the resources there? What is the space like? What are the words? What's the language like? Does it help people to transform their lives, or does it keep them into this way of feeling that they're not what they should be and all that kind of thing, You just told me that, you had to find a carer for your mother because you care for your mother full time. You're already a healer. You care for your mother, quite apart from all the other healing things, and yet that person may not feel they are at all, and may feel completely crushed and at the end of life. And of course, we work with a lot of people who are on that edge.
So just reflecting back a bit, Elizabeth, you know, that you've got all these different people coming to Holy Rood House, attracted for one reason or the other, with such a variety of, in inverted commas, issues, whether it's present or past trauma, physical illness. I know you've worked with people with cancer and other life-limiting conditions, so psychological problems or breakdowns or carers or clergy or on the burnout. I wonder, is it possible to distill down what you're trying to heal? You said there a few times that you work with people feeling worthless, that they're separated from the sense of who God created them to be or to love them. Because it seems to me you're saying that you work with all these different people, and irrespective almost of what they've been through, you help them find themselves again. So is Christian healing ministry about helping people find themselves?
That is partly what it is, Gillian, but it's much bigger than that, because the Christian healing ministry has to address the unjust issues of our world. So it includes how we work with the environment, how we work with food, what prayer is, you know, and what our theology is. We can make God very small with the Christian healing ministry if we're not careful. We work hard not to do that at Holy Rood House, because it's all encompassing, and I think it's far more than just individuals finding themselves, because just ourself is not enough. We need community. So although we do need to give ourselves permission to be selfish and say, actually, I need time at Holy Rood House. Selfish. Someone else has got to look after my mother. I can't do it anymore. That's selfish. That's a good thing. But actually, we need one another. So I couldn't do the Christian healing ministry on my own. I'm part of a community. We do it together. But we're not just part of that community. You know, we're linked up with the Guild, for example. Our communities are wider than that. We're part of the local community of Thirst. There are lots of people doing wonderful things in Thirst for others, and we have links and connections. We're part of the prayer life of other churches around here and so on. But not just that, it's also people who, we have people working with us as volunteers here who are not, they wouldn't necessarily come to the chapel for a service. That's not where they are. But they connect with our spiritual ethos. They recognize something of the holism, the holistic approach, what the healing ministry is. And they also recognize that how we understand the Christian faith is perhaps broader and more open and liberating in many ways than some people might find in the institutional church. And I think we therefore have a greater responsibility to keep looking and keep checking, keep those balances. The questions are far more important than the answers, because the questions are part of a process, aren't they? Which is what Christian healing is. It's always a process. There we are. I've given you a strap line. Christian healing is always a process and always involved with justice.
And I wondered if you maybe were prepared to share any aspects of your personal story, your own woundedness, and in what ways you found healing, in what ways you've used your story to be a person of healing, running a community of healing. And what in you do you think still needs healing? As we all need healing, what's still there for you, Elizabeth?
These are very important questions, and thank you for putting it to me. I think, without sharing details and so on, I think when I first came to Holy Rood House in 1993, it was a very painful time because I had to leave where my heart was in the inner city. And, well, we both did, but we're different people, and we were leaving different kind of ways of how we were leaving stuff. And it all came out of the blue in a moment. It wasn't something we'd been working towards leaving. And we started from scratch. And we also became clergy of a parish down the road at the same time. So we were doing all this all at the same time, which that was all fine. But the loss of that connection of where one places one's heart, really, among the lives of others, was very big for me. And one of the things that got me through it was lots of things were going on, lots of different things were going on for me, was out of the blue, I became very angry. Now, of course, with anger, we're different ways, particularly women are often sort of, well, particularly perhaps in my generation, and within a Christian setting, women don't get angry. You know, women are the peacemakers, women are all that sort of stuff. So we can often depress our own anger. And what helped me through a very difficult time of massive loss when we were setting this up, and it was happening very fast, you know, the house was almost full within the first month, you know, this sort of thing with very few people. You know, we were making the beds, peeling the potatoes, laying the table, doing counselling, you know, we were doing so much. And that was wonderful. I loved it. And Stanley loved it. We thoroughly enjoyed it. It was what we should be doing. But still, the loss of what we'd left with the poverty and the pain of the inner city, which was getting worse and worse. So I suddenly got very angry about loads of stuff, but I wasn't always sure what the anger was about. And I raged against God. And I have to say that my rage against God helped me turn the corner. It was hitting that painful edge that enabled me to turn a corner. And I think I remember saying to Stanley at one point there, it was almost within a day, I turned to him and I said, do you know, I think I'm finding the healing I need. And it was that. And of course, when we are going through those difficult times, it affects our bodies. It goes straight to my back. We often know it goes to your back, doesn't it? Or you get migraine or shoulders or something. For me, it always goes back to goes to my back. So when I knew I was well, so this is a bit of a nutshell, you understand. When I knew I was well was when I'd had a full night's sleep. I woke up in the morning and my back was better. That was it. I'd been through the process, I'd worked through, but it was the allowing myself to go to the emotion in a safe place, Holy Rood House. No one knew about it, apart from Stanley, that I wasn't well at that time, but I had gone to counselling. I'd gone to see a counsellor during that time. Mm. And the rage came actually while I was travelling on the road. And it was a turning point. So I would always say that we need to provide a safe enough space and forms of liturgy, I think, too, rites of passage, all that sort of thing, where people can go to that rage place. They won't unless they feel safe enough to go to the unsafe space in their lives. If they can go to that unsafe space and let it happen, that's a turning point. And I think you see this in Jesus's life. You know, Jesus's rage in the temple is one thing, but you see other bits of rage coming through. And there are times when he's struggling with his life at such an extent, and with the too much going on stuff, where he says, for goodness sake, you know, celebrity, get me out of here. You know, get that boat out on the sea. I need to go on the boat. I need to go up the mountain. Or when he's on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? You know, those words from the Psalm, that utter abandonment, which is also a point of rage, a turning point to resurrection and hope. So it's how I understand healing. I do understand Christian healing, I think, around the Easter story. I know this has often been said, and it'll be said again, you know, it's been said again this Easter. But for me, the Easter Saturday experience, that a lot of our guests have been through the Good Friday. They're still in it a bit. They haven't got to the Sunday bit. They're stuck in the Easter Saturday. And Holy Rood House is there, that community, as it were, pulling the stone away from from that cave, and Christ there pushing us, pulling, the angels there all together, the stone, and there's freedom and liberation. So that's just a small example in my own life of without telling you the details, but it was all to do with utter loss, which took me to a great place of grief.
And thank you very much for sharing that. But also what you were saying there about it's okay to rage and be angry. We go to church and we're supposed to be nice and good and sing nice hymns, well, not during a pandemic, and have a cup of tea
yes.
afterwards, and maybe sign up for the Vicar's Lent course. But actually, our churches should be hubs for healing for the whole community. Maybe places where people take their bodies seriously, and if they need to rage, then to rage, to get in contact with something that's within them, to help them find healing. Now, that's a much more exciting, realistic view of Christian healing than just, can I add your name to the prayer list, which so often it is in churches. And that's been one of the interesting things around the pandemic. I noticed particularly in the early days, where we were all doing lockdown, all doing Zoom, all unable to worship together. Then I heard so many voices from our disabled brothers and sisters, people with serious illness or mental illness, which means they can't leave the house, saying, now now you see what it's like. And there is, I hope, an opportunity to begin to do things differently as we come out.
It's been a learning time, hasn't it, Gillian? And there will still be people who are housebound, but who have learnt how to do Zoom, and people who can't easily get to a building, but who are now working with Zoom. So I think all that has to keep going. We have to look at how we do that, but we also have to, fortunate enough to have a car, get a car and go and pick someone up and bring them to the place where there are people who will be there.
With human contact. And I've noticed, I moved house in lockdown, so I don't know many people where I live, but if I bump into someone, even if it's just the postie, and have a conversation, I feel better, because we need that human contact in order for our own humanity to be recognised, don't we?
I think connection lies at the heart of mission.
It's fascinating doing healing training to a group of people with dog collars, and they're taking as many notes as the people who are lay members of communities, who sometimes know more than the priests and the ministers about the healing ministry. There's lots of education, which can only lead to, it's not about knowing stuff. It's not about passing exams. It's about confidence to proclaim Christ's mission, which, from the beginning was make disciples and heal.
Yes, I think also, Gillian, I think sometimes when I've worked with PCCs and they want me to do something on healing, I always start off with a kind of way of working with people so that they themselves realise that they are already healers, and that other people on the PCC recognise that Mrs. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so, yes, you are a healer, the other church warden. Oh, yes, you're already a healer. We don't want them and us. We need mutual connection. And the earth is there trying to heal us as well. The pandemic is a bit of the rage of the earth, isn't it? It's all tied up together. It's all part of the wider mission. And it's the joy of our salvation. It's what salvation's all about, isn't it? Healing, mission, justice, working together, mutuality, all those lovely things, whether clergy, laity, or people completely outside of the church today. No faith story, many people who come to us, even in sort of 40s, 50s even, have had no connection with a faith story, and yet place them in a situation, an environment where they pick something up that connects, they are awakened to their own spirituality and the possibility of discovering the Christian story, the Jesus story, which is wonderful, life-giving.
So I just want to ask one more question, Elizabeth, and it's a biggie. How do you keep healthy doing all this? And how do you continue to have hope?
So during the pandemic at Holy Rood House, we've worked on our initials, HRH, not Her Royal Highness, but Holy Rood House. So we've had a strapline, holding real hope, all right, HRH. So we hold real hope for our guests. We hold real hope for the wider world. I feel held in real hope by the community. And I also have a very loving family. So I'm very blessed with a loving family who hold me as well. I hope that's mutual that I hold them too. So there's this mutuality. So I think for me, the reason I feel I am relatively healthy, I am passionate, but that's part of my theology. Passion and compassion go together. I'm passionate about compassion. I fall short of the compassion I need to show and embody. And I know that, but I have a community that when I fall short, other people in the community don't fall short of it. We help each other. So that's very, very important. You say that I'm a prophet. Well, I think being prophets is part of the healing ministry because it is about not just speaking out, but acting out justice and the hope that you speak of. Now, for me here at Holy Rood House, I often will say, and I've written about this, that our guests are the prophets. They're the ones who are embodying something of the prophetic hope. It's within them. And they come to Holy Rood House against all the odds and transform their lives. Now, there are many actually who've come to us in very broken place and actually outside of, the faith stories, who are now clergy in Britain and who have found faith. They found a vocation. They found something within themselves. So these people and the poorest of the poor, and I use the term poor broadly in a holistic way, who come to Holy Rood House, they're the prophets. They're teaching us. We are learning. We're a learning community. We're a community of conversation, not just speaking, but actually how it's acted out by those who have the courage to come across the threshold and meet a load of strangers. So I think it's the community which is the prophet. I'm part of that. And we all have different gifts that we bring to that, which is really important. But I'm glad you used the term prophet. I don't know where our prophets are. Where are our prophets in the world? I would say that Greta is a prophet. I'm looking out for others, communities, and the voice of the healing ministry needs to be prophetic, doesn't it? It has to be really bold and radical. It has to go where others fear to tread. Absolutely has to. If it's going to have that depth of effect, really. All we can do at Holy Rood House is just in our very tiny, weeny speck on the earth, do what we can in our small corner of the world, but very holistically, and hopefully be a voice, be prophets in a small way that might help others and help to model something or inspire others as well.